The next generation of games is upon us. Both Sony and Microsoft have revealed to the world the full specs for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. We have a sexy new controller and an unbelievably fast hard drive to look forward to with the PS5. The Xbox Series X looks to be cramming as much power as humanly possible into its cutting-edge design. And we've even been getting some quick looks at next-gen software here and there as well. It's clear that marketing for the new machines is ramping up, and with launches of both boxes planned for holiday 2020, I think I can safely say it's time to get hype. However, for any fan of Rockstar Games, the arrival of the next generation consoles may also bring to the forefront a somewhat bittersweet reality. With the release of the PS4 and Xbox One in 2013, and now their successors here in 2020, we will have officially gone 7 long years, an entire console generation, without the release of a new Grand Theft Auto title. Just look at this release timeline for Rockstar Games over the years. Hard to believe that once upon a time, new Grand Theft Auto games were almost a yearly occurrence. We went from 3 legendary titles on the PS2 to 2 for the last generation of consoles to none with this current generation. Clearly, as time went on, the scale of Rockstar's biggest games only got bigger and bigger. Relatively smaller titles like Max Payne, Bully, or my favorite, Table Tennis, they simply vanished. There was no way valuable resources could be dedicated to those smaller games when massive open worlds needed to be built. At the moment, it seems like Rockstar has transformed into a 2-franchise studio. And with nearly all of their resources this generation dedicated to 2018's Red Dead Redemption 2, it looks like Grand Theft Auto, arguably the biggest franchise in all of video games, will unbelievably skip this entire generation with a new numbered entry not even officially announced. Now, of course, that's not the entire story. Grand Theft Auto 5 originally launched at the tail end of the last generation, but a new enhanced edition of the game was released for the current gen consoles in 2014, with a PC release in 2015. Believe it or not, this enhanced edition of GTA 5 not only sold very well, it is in fact the best-selling game of this entire generation, dominating the charts on both Xbox One and PS4. Despite its origins on last-generation hardware, people seem to be buying themselves a new console and a copy of GTA 5 to go with it. That's right, a last-gen title is the current gen's killer app. As of the making of this video here in early 2020, GTA 5, nearing its 7th birthday, continues to break records. In February 2020, GTA 5 was the 3rd best-selling game in North America, trailing only the brand new NBA 2K and Call of Duty releases. Even Rockstar's own Red Dead Redemption 2, which is not even 2 years old at this point, can't quite hang with the king. And this is not a fluke. GTA 5 has been a top 10 seller damn near every month since it launched in 2013. All over the world too, this is not just in America. Rockstar has continued to keep player engagement up by releasing new content through GTA Online. The Diamond Casino and Resort DLC released throughout 2019 resulted in GTA 5's strongest year yet. This kind of success 6+ years into a game's life is absolutely insane. It's completely unprecedented. And whether you play GTA Online or not, the truth is, millions of people around the world do. And these content updates have done an incredible job keeping the GTA name in the public consciousness throughout this entire generation. But I think we could all agree, as cool as ongoing GTA Online DLC is, it's not the same as a full-fledged, brand new title. It does not replace the big one, the one we've all waited 7 years for, Grand Theft Auto 6. At the end of the day, the GTA 5 we know today, and all of the various online updates added over the years, are built on top of a foundation that was created for hardware released in 2005. That is 15 years ago. Here in 2020, GTA 5 does at times show its age, especially with a new Rockstar game like Red Dead Redemption 2 to compare to. From load times to visuals to the overall feel of gameplay and the various different systems at work, RDR 2 is technically a step above GTA 5 in just about every way. And of course that's to be expected, as it was built from the ground up for the more powerful current gen hardware. Even though the enhanced editions of GTA 5 have been incredibly well received, we are still waiting for the GTA franchise to truly enter the current generation and really take unrestricted advantage of everything the hardware has to offer. But unfortunately, at this point, the idea of an all-new GTA being released on current gen hardware might be a lost cause. It's looking more and more like we'll have to wait quite a while longer, well into the next generation of games. But all I know is this: right now, I've never been hungrier for a new GTA game, and I'm sure millions of others are in the same boat. Just look at the replies to literally anything Rockstar tweets these days. This wait between entries has been brutal, and it doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. So perhaps for the time being, it may be wise to look into an alternative. Is there anything out there that can scratch that GTA itch, even just a little bit? Well, GTA clones have been around ever since GTA 3 set the world on fire back in 2001. And while some of these crime-heavy, city-based open-world titles have been okay, I don't think any have come close to hitting the insanely high bar that Rockstar has set with the Grand Theft Auto franchise. In my experience, there's always been a certain lack of polish and ambition with these titles. The surface level similarities are obviously there, but it's just not enough to capture that same feeling that a finely crafted Rockstar open world gives to players. The GTA games are so much more than simple city-based open world games where you shoot dudes and steal cars. They're truly the complete video game package, and Rockstar goes above and beyond to check every last box. Top-tier world building, storytelling, art direction, mission design, music, budget, variety, voice acting, overall polish, visuals, the list goes on and on. When Rockstar is finally done cooking a new GTA, the result is always the very best the industry has to offer, and the market agrees. So the question is this: does any other developer in the world have the kind of time, resources, and most importantly, the talent to put out a game as polished and deep as a mainline GTA? Is anyone out there willing to dedicate the better part of a decade and the hundreds of millions of dollars necessary to produce something more than a simple cosmetic GTA clone? Can there be another truly top-tier, city-based, open-world game on the market that could reach the very same heights as one of Rockstar's efforts? Well, I think at long last, we may finally have the chance to play a true world-class alternative to Grand Theft Auto. There may finally be a team out there who has proven they could hang with Rockstar when it comes to creating a deep, high-budget, finely crafted open-world experience. As Rockstar remained occupied with a return to the Old West for most of the generation, a new challenger to the open-world throne appeared seemingly from out of nowhere. Enter Polish game developer CD Projekt Red. CD Projekt Red has amazingly been around since 1994, though they really made a name for themselves in 2007 with the release of The Witcher.
I'll try.
They're coming. The Frightener is very dangerous.
Though certainly a janky-ass experience by today's standards, The Witcher was well received when first released, with a solid 81 score on Metacritic. The fantasy action RPG sold well and was deemed a success, so CD Projekt Red began work on the sequel, The Witcher 2: Assassins of Kings. Released in 2011, Witcher 2 was an improvement over the original in every way. With the franchise making its debut on home consoles and managing even more impressive reviews than its predecessor, the world was really beginning to take notice of this little Polish team's video game take on a universe born from fantasy novels released in the 1990s. It didn't sound like the most appealing concept in a gaming world dominated by Halo, Call of Duty, and the Wii, but The Witcher 2 went on to sell a very respectable 1.7 million copies by May of 2012. By February 2013, Witcher 1 and 2 hit 5 million copies sold in total. And by the end of 2014, that number ballooned to 8 million copies. But everything changed for CD Projekt Red when the third entry of their sprouting franchise was released to the world. Wait, doesn't that sound a bit familiar? Anyways, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was a huge departure for the team. For the first time in the franchise's history, Geralt of Rivia would be placed in a giant, fully explorable open world. And this monumental change to the way The Witcher played took things to another level. The Witcher 3 completely blew away all expectations that anyone could have possibly had for the small Polish developer.
And the winner for Game of the Year 2015 is The Witcher 3.
Released simultaneously for the PC, PS4, and Xbox One, The Witcher 3 managed a ridiculous 93 score on Metacritic, placing it in the most elite company in the industry. CD Projekt Red managed to craft an incredibly ambitious open world that featured not only an engaging main story, but was also filled with high-quality side quests and secondary optional content as well. Witcher 3 featured a huge cast of memorable and well-written characters, a nearly endless amount of customization, gorgeous art direction, various twists and turns depending on your decisions, and ultimately up to 36 different potential endings. Simply put, the game was huge. It was deep, and it was packed to the absolute brim with stuff to do. In the end, this Polish team of 200-something talented individuals managed a feat that the biggest juggernauts in AAA gaming, with teams nearing 1,000 people, couldn't even touch. The Witcher 3 was named the consensus Game of the Year in 2015, and for many, stands among the very best of the entire console generation. Perhaps even more impressive than the incredibly vast and immersive open world CD Projekt Red managed to craft was the mainstream success The Witcher 3 went on to achieve. Earlier I mentioned Witcher 1 and 2 managed to hit 8 million copies sold by the end of 2014. That's pretty good, right? Well, as of the making of this video in early 2020, The Witcher 3 has sold an ungodly 28 million copies across the PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. It will inevitably crack that 30 million barrier, putting it in the most elite company in the history of the gaming industry. Oh yeah, and the success of the game also led to a Netflix TV show adaptation of The Witcher, starring frickin' Superman as Geralt of Rivia. You can't name too many video games that have managed to create this kind of mainstream penetration. As much as I talk about the incredible success of GTA and Red Dead on this channel, even they haven't been adapted into a movie or TV show quite yet. The success of the Netflix show has even managed to transfer back to the game itself, which hit a new peak concurrent playership on Steam thanks to the show's popularity. And The Witcher 3 continues to sell well month after month here in 2020, 5 years after its initial release. CD Projekt Red's open world masterpiece clearly struck a chord with audiences. Seemingly overnight, they went from a small Polish team making these weird fantasy action RPGs for the PC to a legitimate juggernaut of the industry. As of 2020, CD Projekt Red is now the most valuable company in all of Poland, and with a valuation of about $8 billion US, it has become the second biggest video game company in all of Europe, behind only Ubisoft. And as we all know, Ubisoft cranks out like 40 games a week. For CD Projekt Red, all of this success is thanks mainly to one single game. So of course, after all of that insane success, the world was left asking, what's next from CD Projekt Red? And actually, we already knew the answer, as it was announced and teased years before The Witcher 3 was even released. But we finally got our first real, in-engine look at their all-new project, set in a wildly different world, at E3 2018. Cyberpunk 2077. A bit of a departure from the medieval fantasy world of The Witcher, wouldn't you say? Gone were the horses, swords, and lush natural settings, and in were the cars, the guns, and a gritty, futuristic urban city. Despite being announced all the way back in 2012, it's obvious that The Witcher 3's insane success changed the overall scale of the game pretty dramatically. Cyberpunk was no longer just the next project from a small team making fantasy RPGs for the PC. It was now the premier, city-based open-world video game currently announced, as those other guys were still finishing up over in the Wild West. This time around, the public wasn't going to be caught off guard by the quality of CD Projekt Red's new game. Coming off The Witcher 3, expectations for Cyberpunk were sky high. Leaning into all of that hype, Microsoft saved the game's trailer for the main event of their E3 2018 press conference. The one more thing. E3 2018 was basically the coming out party for Cyberpunk 2077. Later that week, the press were blown away by what they saw of the game from behind closed doors.
It is maybe the most well-realized setting or close to the most that I've ever seen.
Feels like
It is so fucking
they have
cyberpunk.
covered the canvas.
Every fucking bit of the UI and the interactions and the dialogue and everything about it is just like dripping with that particular atmosphere.
The word of mouth was absolutely insane, and the hype train had officially left the station. If there was any doubt at all that Cyberpunk 2077 couldn't reach the heights of The Witcher 3, it was silenced when CD Projekt Red released a massive 48-minute gameplay video. We got our first good look at some of the game's various systems in action, as the video took us through the entirety of an early main story mission. The deep world building, charm, and customization we remember from The Witcher 3 was all there, but this time translated to an urban, highly technical, dystopian world, absolutely oozing with recognizable cyberpunk style in every frame. And yes, as early as E3 2018, when the press got their first look at Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay, comparisons to Grand Theft Auto were already being made. CD Projekt Red had earned that respect, to be uttered in the same breath as the franchise that pioneered the open world formula that games still follow to this day. Basically, this is all leading me to a fairly simple conclusion. Since The Witcher 3's launch, it feels like everything is coming together perfectly for CD Projekt Red. Cyberpunk 2077 will be their first new release since hitting it big. And here in 2020, as we inch closer and closer to launch, there's an electricity in the air. I see so much hype every time we get any little morsel of new information about Cyberpunk. It just feels like it's going to be a very special game, and I think the incredible momentum from The Witcher 3 is going to propel Cyberpunk 2077 to another level. I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm legitimately expecting one of the biggest and best games ever made. This is it. For the first time, we're going to see a GTA clone come to life with the same kind of resources, time, and talent behind it as the authentic Rockstar product itself. Now, I'm sure some of you are sitting there thinking, come on, just because Cyberpunk is set in a city, and it's an open world game with guns and cars and crime, that does not mean it's the second coming of Grand Theft Auto. Well, to that I would say,
I disagree.
Okay, let me clarify here. I'm not going to try and convince you that CD Projekt Red is actively trying to make their own version of Grand Theft Auto. And to be honest, calling Cyberpunk a GTA clone is probably doing it a disservice because, let's be clear, it is absolutely going to be its own thing. And even though there are similarities between the titles, there are also some obvious differences. What I do strongly believe, and what I am going to cover in this video, is that with Cyberpunk 2077, CD Projekt Red will deliver on a game that can satisfy the hunger of GTA fans who have been deprived of a new title for so many years now. it will scratch that itch better than any other city-based open-world game that has come before it. And I'm going to go into detail here, explaining why I feel that way, based not only on the Cyberpunk gameplay that we've seen, but also, and perhaps more importantly, my extended time playing The Witcher 3, as it was during those 200 plus hours playing the game that I was really able to get a feel for how CD Projekt Red builds their worlds and tells their stories. So many of the similarities between the two studios are not just surface level, so to properly explore them, we'll need to dig a little deeper and look into the overall game development philosophies that are shared between both Rockstar Games and CD Projekt Red. But first, there are, without a doubt, going to be certain narrative and gameplay choices in Cyberpunk that we rarely see in Grand Theft Auto, if at all. It's not a one-to-one copy, nor should it be. We've already seen some of those uniquely CD Projekt Red design choices in the gameplay videos, so let's quickly touch on them now before we get into the really juicy stuff. First things first, CD Projekt Red absolutely packs their games with traditional RPG mechanics. In Cyberpunk 2077, there is nearly endless potential for customization of your characters, between all the different weapons you have access to, equipable gear that will boost your stats or have various different effects, the choice of a life path that will affect how you make your way through the game and communicate with other characters, attributes you could level up that will have a direct impact on your playstyle, and unlockable perks. And that's just the stuff we know. We will be keeping track of a ton of numbers as we make our way through the world of Cyberpunk, far more than any GTA game. Rockstar has also toyed with multiple endings and branching paths, where the outcome of certain missions depend on choices made by the player. But this stuff is definitely a CD Projekt Red specialty that we see all the time in Witcher 3 and soon in Cyberpunk 2077. In the breakdown videos we've seen so far, one of the main focuses is just how many different ways a player can tackle a single quest. Your options change drastically depending on your class. And we even see a safer, non-violent approach unlocked should you go a bit out of your way to complete an optional objective. This kind of freedom is definitely something I'd like to see a little bit more of in Rockstar Games, which have been criticized for being a little bit too strict at times with their mission designs. Perhaps the biggest difference between Cyberpunk and GTA is the camera. Cyberpunk 2077 will be played mostly from a first-person perspective, with the camera pulling out only on certain occasions, like when you take control of a vehicle. And even then, it's just an option. You can drive around entirely in first person if you so choose. Honestly, at first, the choice of going with first person for Cyberpunk kinda baffled me, since we are coming off the third person Witcher 3 after all. But then, as I saw more and more of Cyberpunk's gameplay in action, I gotta admit, I became a believer. The entire world just oozes with Cyberpunk flavor. It looks really good taking it all in first person. Obviously, you are closer to the world in first person than you would be in third person, and any little visual imperfection is going to stick out even more in first person. Luckily, CD Projekt Red seems to be going all out to make sure you're never taken out of the experience by something that doesn't look like it belongs. Everything looks so incredible, from the character models, their animations and lip syncing, to the various surfaces and interiors, to weapons and objects, to the crazy digital interfaces you're constantly interacting with. The visual consistency you'd expect from the very top tier open world games on the market will absolutely be on display here with Cyberpunk 2077. And the fact that we're absorbing all of this wonderful CD Projekt Red art direction in first person might just make the world feel more immersive than any title that came before it. Then there's the game's combat system. The combat was one of the most criticized aspects of The Witcher 3, and I think that probably pissed CD Projekt Red off a little bit. Gone are the swords and signs here in Cyberpunk 2077. With a far more recognizable first-person gun-focused combat system, CD Projekt Red promises to deliver on the most straightforward combat system seen in any of their games to date. You aim the thing at the bad guy and click. Even a child could grasp such a concept. That said, I still expect an incredibly deep combat system once you start digging into all of the game's customization options. We've already seen a ton of weapons and crazy movement options, and I honestly expect this game to push first-person shooter controls to the absolute limit if an early game main story mission already looks like this. We've seen an air dash ability, bullet time effects that slow everything down, and some very slick moves that allow you to get a better shot at an enemy's weak point. God knows just how deep this combat system will become depending on the upgrades and weapons you come across over hundreds of hours with the game. In comparison, GTA's combat system is definitely a lot more grounded. Though to be fair, the characters in Los Santos aren't, equipping themselves with cybernetic upgrades that allow them to move like borderline superheroes. Just for fun, I recently decided to jump into another giant open world game to see what it would feel like to go through the whole thing exclusively in first person. That's right, my entire first person HUD-less Red Dead Redemption 2 playthrough, found right here on the channel, was in a way a practice run for Cyberpunk 2077. And in the end, it was actually pretty damn fun. I've played GTA 5 all the way through in first person as well, and at this point, a giant open world game played in first person isn't really an issue to me at all, even if I am fighting against 20 years of Rockstar open world muscle memory and ultimately prefer a third person experience at the end of the day. But given the talent over at CD Projekt Red, I trust they aren't going to screw this up. And everything you loved about Witcher 3 and its lovingly crafted, deep open world will be back and better than ever in Cyberpunk 2077, perspective be damned. I truly look forward to completely escaping into this dystopian world with the first-person view. And hey, you never know. They added first person to GTA 5 a year after its original launch when the enhanced version dropped. So maybe one day they'll say screw it and give us a fixed third-person perspective mode for Cyberpunk as a way to maybe incentivize people to replay the game on next-gen consoles. Who knows? Either way, I think the first-person perspective will be just fine for this game, since everything I love about CD Projekt Red's games in general aren't dependent on a specific camera perspective. And hey, we'll still get a taste of third-person action every time we jump into a vehicle anyways, and given how huge this world is, I expect to be on that bike quite a bit. All of that to say, yes, there are clear differences between Cyberpunk and GTA. Anyone could spot them by simply watching the gameplay videos that have been released. But of course, it's a good thing that there are these clear differences. As much as I love GTA, I wouldn't want to see another developer just rip it off entirely. I'd certainly expect certain advances and changes given it's been 7 years since the last GTA game was released. We have plenty of unambitious GTA clones out there already that bring nothing new to the table and are quickly forgotten. CD Projekt Red bringing their unique touch to the familiar city-based open world formula only strengthens my argument. To truly take the place of such a juggernaut in the industry, you can't just do what has already been done. Luckily, Cyberpunk looks to innovate and break new ground just as much as it will be standing on the shoulders of giants from the past. And yes, the influence of Rockstar Games and their open world formula is absolutely present when playing through CD Projekt Red's open world titles. And at the end of the day, it's that feeling that has me excited for Cyberpunk 2077 the most. I get mad GTA vibes when watching all of these gameplay videos. Now that we've discussed some of the big differences between the two franchises, it's time for the main event. What is it about CD Projekt Red and the way they put together games that reminds me so much of Rockstar Games specifically? Let's dig into why I feel Cyberpunk could not only be a great game in its own right, but indeed the closest we get to a new, current-gen Grand Theft Auto title. I think it all begins with the philosophical similarities between the studios. In other words, their thought process and how exactly Rockstar and CD Projekt Red put together their incredible open world games. Indeed, these similarities go beyond the aesthetic of the world itself, which is why I feel my hundreds of hours with Witcher 3 are so important here. It was Witcher 3 that was really able to give me a good idea of how exactly CD Projekt Red approached open world game development in general, and it was the first indication, to me at least, that the game these guys managed to build really feels like a Rockstar game more than any other open world title I've played in the last 20 years. From everything we've seen of Cyberpunk 2077 so far, we can pretty much expect a lot more of the same, except bigger and better. For obvious reasons, Cyberpunk's world comes much closer to the one we jump into with a GTA game. Still though, it would be very easy to just say, look at this amazing open world game with cars and guns and crime in a city, best GTA clone ever confirmed. In reality, I feel like there's so much more at play here, and it's mostly below the surface. With similar philosophies come similar results. Open world titles that are so polished and high quality that others simply can't measure up. No other games on the market really come close. I think there are two areas in particular that both Rockstar and CD Projekt Red really focus in on, and they nail both with damn near perfect execution: world building and storytelling. For the longest time, I thought Rockstar was the only developer in the industry capable of bringing both of these elements together in a top-tier open world game, until CD Projekt Red finally cracked the code in 2015 with The Witcher 3. To execute on both of these aspects at such a high level, we find another similarity. Both Rockstar and CD Projekt Red understand the importance of a long development cycle. These teams are pushing the absolute limits of the medium when it comes to size and scope for an open world game. And with that comes very long development cycles and delays. When I was younger, this stuff used to frustrate me, but these days I see so many unpolished games rushed out the door in a semi-broken state that honestly, I say take all the time you need to make these games perfect. GTA 5, The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Cyberpunk 2077 have all been delayed multiple times. But by now, you know there's a good reason for that. They don't want to put out a mere 9.5 out of 10. It needs to be perfect. And if that means the game needs a few more months of polish, so be it. Both Rockstar and CD Projekt Red have a very clear vision from the outset, and the quality of the game is of paramount importance. The end result is a final product jam-packed with content, going above and beyond most other games out there, and nothing feels rushed. There is no corporate meddling or higher-ups forcing very strict deadlines, or else we would have had a new GTA game out every year instead of not at all this entire generation. Cyberpunk has been in the works since at least 2012, and will release a good 5 years after The Witcher 3. The wait for all of us is long, but when they finally do ship those games, boy do you know you're going to be getting your money's worth. These are massive games that are pushing the industry forward. Worlds with unparalleled size and scope, the highest production values, pushing the most powerful hardware to its limits, hundreds of hours worth of quests or missions, a giant engaging world that is fun to explore, and constantly throwing new things at you, and of course a satisfying story with interesting characters. You simply don't get something like that if the teams have to adhere to an annual or biannual release schedule, or prioritize profits ahead of game quality. This brings me to the world building, where again, both developers are best in class. They definitely have somewhat different approaches here. With heavy influence from movies, music, TV shows, and American pop culture in general, Rockstar will kind of blend all that stuff together when creating a new GTA or Red Dead game. On the other hand, CD Projekt Red is specifically adapting worlds that have already been created for other mediums into video game form. Though at that point, the artists and writers at CD Projekt Red work their magic, adding tons of new lore into these already established worlds. These additions aren't just there to make these worlds work as a video game. They're added to flesh things out even further to make the worlds feel even bigger, deeper, and more engaging in general. Either way, the final result from both is an absolute master class of world building in video games. Every nook and cranny in these games contains something interesting to find, or someone to talk to that fleshes out the world in some way. These worlds are filled to the absolute brim, and it's not long before a new icon either appears on your minimap, something meaningful appears that the player can interact with, or you just see something on the screen that catches your eye and you're encouraged to investigate further. By the way, this kind of thing is happening non-stop for hundreds of hours of playtime. A good chunk of this world building comes across through each game's main story. The player is taken all around the world and gets to interact with all of the primary characters. The Witcher 3 and Rockstar's various open world titles tell some of my favorite stories in the history of the medium. By the end of the adventure, I feel like I've made a strong personal connection to the lead character, and we are exposed to some of the best cinematics, dialogue, and voice acting that you'll ever see or hear in a game. There aren't too many Arthur Morgans or Geralt of Rivias out there. These dudes are fleshed out. The presentation is just so great from start to finish, and so much of that has to do with the main characters we spend all this time with and how perfectly their stories are told. To go with these unforgettable main characters, the games all feature well-developed supporting characters as well. Characters you want to learn more about and will often lead to some of the best side quests you'll experience in a game. When you build such a well-written and fleshed out world, the player will often find themselves exploring and yearning for more. When even the side quests are great, offering an experience that is usually somewhat different from the main story, but still very high quality, then it really feels like your exploration is rewarded. I can't tell you how many times I'll come across some random NPC in a random part of the map, only to stumble upon a really fun side quest or stranger mission. In most games, so-called side quests get the shaft presentation-wise compared to the main storyline, sometimes not even giving the characters any voice acting at all. That is certainly not the case here with CD Projekt Red and Rockstar Games, and it all adds so much to the world and the overall presentation of the game. In my mind, the storytelling doesn't even end there. The way the player interacts with the environment in these games tells a whole story on its own. Whether you're presented with a shot of a beautiful vista as you come to the top of a mountain, exploring an empty house with certain artifacts left there for you to examine, or flying over the city and countryside, this stuff is more subtle than a scripted dialogue between characters, but works so well and adds so much to the overall experience. Some of my most memorable moments playing these games come from my screen just being filled with a gorgeous landscape. It's like, whoa, that is beautiful. You just get overwhelmed by the incredible visuals sometimes, and it just makes you feel good. You basically get this stuff non-stop with cinematic mode in Red Dead Redemption 2, and it never gets old. These more subtle interactions with the environment are perhaps the best way to take in the masterful art direction seen in these games, and are always welcome in my book. But the most important similarity of all between CD Projekt Red games and Rockstar games are the drunk sequences. Rockstar and CD Projekt Red know how to craft some amazing, unforgettable moments where your character gets absolutely hammered. I mean, these are just wonderful and legitimately some of the funniest and most memorable moments from each game. There are not too many games out there that properly capture the feeling of being completely smashed, but these two pull it off perfectly. Come on, you can't argue with me on this one. I expect Cyberpunk, with all the different drugs and substances the player can consume, just might top everything that came before it when it comes to crafting a sequence where the player gets intoxicated. But seriously, in the end, having played all of these games for hundreds of hours, I truly feel there are a lot of similarities here between the fantastic open world titles by Rockstar and CD Projekt Red. Simply put, they just feel similar when you actually play through them, and it's so satisfying to escape into such well-crafted worlds being portrayed on such a massive scale. The two devs in my mind operate in a different stratosphere from the rest of the industry when it comes to storytelling and putting together a deep, satisfying open world that constantly pushes the limits of game development as we know it. I also think, in a way, the masses kinda agree with me here. I don't think it's possible to sell 30 million copies of a game and receive such universal critical praise unless you do everything just right. At the end of the day, CD Projekt Red has somehow managed to create an open world title that both sold and reviewed as well as Rockstar's. And I think a part of that is because, as I outlined, there are similarities at play here between these games and how exactly they are built. The numbers don't lie, and at this point, it's clear that Rockstar and CD Projekt Red are basically in a class of their own. And now we are just months away from the release of CD Projekt Red's very own spin on the city-based open-world genre, complete with vehicles to drive, guns to shoot, underworlds to conquer, crimes to commit, and cash to make. The similarities between these titles will only become more apparent thanks to those cosmetic aspects, but in my mind, CD Projekt Red was already well on their way to both replicating Rockstar's open world formula, while at the same time placing their own unique twist on it, judging from The Witcher 3 alone. Cyberpunk, from what we've seen so far, promises to inch even closer to the world-class open world formula made famous by Grand Theft Auto. Even though it's CD Projekt Red's general approach to game development and high-quality output that has me most excited for their new game, I'll also gladly admit I am beyond hyped to jump into a modern, urban world that focuses in on crime and gang warfare. The appeal of a GTA-style world is pretty simple to understand at the end of the day. Doing a bunch of illegal shit, making money, shooting people, getting guns, then getting better guns, getting cars, then getting better cars. All that stuff just works really well for a video game. It's a big part of why 5 GTA games have received such an incredible reception over the last 20 years. And now we're gonna get CD Projekt Red's take on that kind of world. That in itself is super hype, and at this point, I can't fathom a scenario where CD Projekt Red doesn't end up releasing the greatest GTA clone of all time. Just from the little footage we've seen so far of the game, we could spot longtime GTA tropes all over the place. The intimidating, larger-than-life crime lords giving us missions to complete, promising both cash and street cred if we could successfully pull off their request. Just kinda low-key driving to a place while casually advancing the story with your buddy in a car, and oh shit, people in another car are shooting at us. Oh boy, oh boy. Actually reaching the place of interest with the intent to get a deal done all nice and clean and no one gets hurt, and then everything devolves into a massive shootout somehow, and so on. Anyone who's played any of the 3D GTA titles recognizes these scenarios, and I suspect this kind of stuff is going to go on and on throughout the entire game's main story. But hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Over-the-top, intimidating dudes who dress all weird and ask us to commit a crime for them? It works. Drive-bys work. And you better believe everything going to hell at the last second, resulting in a giant shootout, that shit works. There's another interesting parallel between Cyberpunk and GTA, specifically one we saw when Rockstar's franchise was hitting it big during the PS2 era, and that is the effective use of A-list Hollywood superstars to elevate the game. Keanu Reeves plays a major role here in Cyberpunk 2077 as Johnny Silverhand, constantly following you around and commenting on your actions. Keanu will be fulfilling a role here in Cyberpunk similar to that of Samuel L. Jackson and Ray Liotta back during the PS2 era GTA games. Their mere presence elevates the title for the mainstream. Grabbing an A-list Hollywood superstar, putting their face all over the game's marketing, and having them in the flesh going out to promote the game, it just makes Cyberpunk feel like a super big deal. Keanu's reveal at E3 2019, followed by him actually coming out on stage, was a massive surprise. It was super hype, probably the craziest moment of the entire show, and most importantly, had everyone talking. Also, it instantly became a meme.
You're breathtaking.
Keanu, what a legend. At this point, GTA has reached such a level of ubiquity that Rockstar doesn't even bring in A-listers anymore because they don't have to. But for CD Projekt Red, as they are just on the cusp of that massive mainstream recognition, I think bringing in a star like this is a fantastic idea. Also, it helps that Keanu Reeves is beloved. Currently, he's super hot coming off the John Wick films. Oh, and he just happens to play one of the most mainstream recognizable characters in the entire history of the cyberpunk genre. He's basically as perfect a choice you could make when it comes to bringing in a Hollywood actor to play a major role in this specific game. I also think it's hard to ignore all of the similarities between Cyberpunk and GTA 5 that are going on outside of the game itself. As of right now, Cyberpunk 2077 is set to launch on September 17th, 2020. The September before the new console's launch. The tail end of this current generation, and the perfect way to take advantage of the enormous current generation's install base before everyone trades their hardware in or throws it in a closet to pick up a new machine. Doesn't this sound familiar? Rockstar pulled off the exact same thing with GTA 5 right down to the day, and the result was literally the most successful launch in entertainment history. I think this is a brilliant strategy on CD Projekt Red's part, because as I've kind of been going on and on about in this video, I think this game will deliver on that same incredibly polished, hype-inducing, high-quality experience that gets everyone's attention like a GTA game. Cyberpunk feels like the last hurrah of the current generation, and with no new GTA title to fill in the void, I expect tens of millions of people will be there day one to buy the game and play the hell out of their PS4s and Xbox Ones one last time before picking up next-gen hardware. Look, you're practically asking for the comparisons to be made when you roll out your giant, city-based open-world crime game the same exact day as the other giant city-based open-world crime game. CD Projekt Red is really going for it here. That is amazing. But it doesn't even stop there. Much like GTA 5, the Cyberpunk experience won't end in September with the game's launch. Cyberpunk 2077 will also pack an online multiplayer mode, but it will be launching sometime after the base game is released. Once again, this is exactly what Rockstar pulled with GTA 5 and GTA Online, which first rolled out in October of 2013. Though it was so glitchy at first, with millions and millions of excited players trying to access it all at once, that it was basically unplayable for that first month. Hopefully CD Projekt Red knows what they're getting into here, and they're able to smoothly roll this thing out. Honestly, I like this strategy when it comes to rolling out a giant multiplayer mode that complements a primarily single-player experience. You give everyone enough time to wrap up the single-player campaign for the first time, then keep the player base engaged by dropping the online mode. I'm really intrigued to see how they implement this multiplayer mode and what exactly the gameplay loop looks like. I suspect we'll get our first good look at Cyberpunk Online sometime around launch day in September. Finally, let's take a peek at the next generation itself, which in all likelihood will be starting about 2 months into Cyberpunk's life. GTA 5 had a massive second life on new platforms, and it already sounds like Cyberpunk will be receiving the same kind of treatment. With both Xbox Series X and PS5 being fully backwards compatible, Cyberpunk will continue to thrive on those platforms, almost certainly with enhancements like ray tracing and much faster load times. Xbox has already confirmed that anyone who buys Cyberpunk on Xbox One will also receive the upgraded Series X version free of charge, and I expect we'll hear a similar message coming out of Sony very soon as well. Or you can just play it on Geralt of Rivia's platform of choice.
PC.
Oh, wow.
This game is going to be so massive that most players will probably just be getting started with it when the next-gen hardware drops, or they're waiting to receive it as a Christmas gift, perhaps alongside a new console. Ultimately, I do think this game will primarily be played and enjoyed on the next-gen Xbox and PlayStation for years and years, much like GTA 5 before it. I'm not expecting only a year or two of post-launch support either. I think it's entirely possible that, much like GTA 5, Cyberpunk 2077 finds success for the next 5 or 6 years, the entire next generation. And it's going to need consistent updates to keep players engaged, much like Rockstar has done with GTA 5. Okay, we're probably getting a bit ahead of ourselves here, but if I've argued anything in this video, it's that I believe CD Projekt Red is up to the task and ready to support their gigantic, ambitious new world for the long haul. I could probably go on all day trying to point out and describe the similarities that I see between these two developers. But if I had to sum it up, it's really just a feeling. The Witcher 3 makes me feel satisfied the same way a Rockstar open world game does. So I can't help but feel excited for a new game from the same team that is clearly going for something closer to the GTA aesthetic. All of these games bring to life a massive, realistic world that is so easy to get lost in. They're full of people to meet and stuff to do, and are held together by some wonderful storytelling. When playing through The Witcher 3, it was the first time that I truly felt that another game developer had managed to tap into the same kind of magic that Rockstar seemingly pumps into their big titles like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption. And I've played plenty of great open world games over the years, but I promise you this, I've never said that about any of them until now, having played The Witcher 3. Not only was it another huge open world title with a long development cycle and a clear vision that pushed the limits of the most powerful hardware on the market, but factor in the critical and commercial success. That's when it really becomes clear just how impressive The Witcher 3 truly is, penetrating a space that really only Rockstar has been able to occupy. There is love poured into these games, and I suspect Cyberpunk 2077 will get that exact same kind of treatment and provide that very same kind of joy. At last, an open world title with GTA vibes that will also deliver on that same GTA quality that none have ever been able to deliver on before. I think the void left by Rockstar and the Grand Theft Auto franchise this generation can in fact be filled by Cyberpunk 2077. And that is something special. No pressure, CD Projekt Red. And that's going to wrap it up for today. I think it's safe to say that I'm a bit excited to get my hands on Cyberpunk 2077. I wouldn't just throw out a comparison to Rockstar like this if I didn't actually truly really mean it. I hope after watching this video, you too are feeling the hype like I am, and maybe you'll even give CD Projekt Red's new game a shot, if you've only been playing Rockstar's open world titles up until now, and are tired of waiting for GTA 6. This year is flying by so damn fast that we're going to be neck deep in Night City with a DualSense in hand before we know it. So now I want to hear from you. Are you all as excited for Cyberpunk as I am? Can it rule the gaming world when it launches this September, just before a new generation, and possibly fill that GTA 6-sized hole in our hearts? Will it at least provide us with a world-class, city-based, open-world experience that scratches the same itch? Or is Rockstar one of a kind and I'm just talking crazy? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video and want to see more Cyberpunk 2077 and Rockstar-related content, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Like I said, September is quickly approaching, and I'm expecting the marketing hype train to really get rolling very soon for Cyberpunk 2077. We've already received confirmation that Cyberpunk will be a big focus at IGN's Summer of Gaming digital event, which will be taking place in June. It's too bad there won't be a big, bombastic E3 press conference this year with Keanu making an appearance to hype up the game, but I think we'll be alright. Luckily, we still have this thing called the internet and YouTube.com, so expect CD Projekt Red to completely blow us away with some all-new, close-to-final footage from the game. And of course, expect just as much hype for the PS5 and Xbox Series X during that very same time period. We are just on the cusp of a new generation, so prepare to be absolutely bombarded with info, videos, and new next-gen game announcements over the next couple of weeks and months. 2020 has not been a great year so far, to say the least, but looking on the bright side, there is a ton of huge gaming related stuff to look forward to this year, and I'm going to be on top of all of it here at the channel. So expect a lot more videos soon, but until next time, thanks so much for watching everyone, be safe, and take care.